Chapter 2 of Absolute Batman has officially arrived, and it is called, affectionately, The Zoo. And I thought we'd go through it, break it down, and go through some stuff you may or may not have missed, as well as provide some theories as to where the story may be going. So, let's talk about it. Before we get into the video, I just want to say, consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help me out. But this chapter opens up with an awesome cover page of Batman pouncing on Alfred here. Remember, this world's Alfred is like nothing we've known before, kind of. He's actually someone who's actually hunting bats in chapter 1. Now, if you want to see a video on that, feel free to check it out on the link down below. But we are shown a flashback of the events that went down with Thomas Wayne, and also the origins for how Batman became Batman, how he came to be the Bat. Now again, a little reminder, there is so much that is different in this universe. Even Batman's origins have changed ever so slightly. Instead, he only lost just one parent rather than both of them in Crime Alley. But just like in the previous chapter, I have to say that the artwork and the color scheme here are absolutely stunning. The harsh contrasts of red mixed with the blues has genuinely just been sublime to take in, and it is genuinely just a beautiful aesthetic, similar to the Absolute Superman and Wonder Woman. They all seem to have these similar color schemes going on right now. Again, if you want to see videos on either both Absolute Superman or Wonder Woman, you can click through to the channel right there. But we cut back to the present here as Alfred, who is acting as narrator, again is seemingly spying on the Bat, as he effortlessly brawls his way through legions of party animals with his brand new improved cape, which was built based on a design that Bruce made when he was younger that was supposed to be a mobile collapsing base bridge based on the anatomy of a Batwing. Now, I mentioned this in the previous video, but this version of Batman feels a lot more brutal. He feels animalistic almost, like he feels like a different feral version of himself. Even the party animals themselves sort of remind me heavily of the mutants from Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. However, Alfred mentions how even though bats he appears like he is everywhere by meeting the party animals head on here, and again showing off the prep time that Batman has spent learning the city, his enemy, and years leading up to before he became Batman. But this version is also just way more brutal. As I mentioned before, we see him fighting in an aquarium here where he uses the spikes on his back to puncture the wall of the aquarium to allow some of the salt water in, and he uses a small pellet that turns that said salt water into hydrochloric acid. If you don't know what hydrochloric acid can do to the human body or its skin, you should probably Google it, because it's not very nice. He causes all of these party animals here severe burns, and even one of them complaining about losing some toes. So yeah, this Batman, he is not playing around at all. But this leads us into more monologuing from Alfred, who notes that this Batman has stash houses all over the city, not one, but many caves. It's like he's trading off the quality for quantity in exchange for having the riches style. He's got like quantity everywhere, but all of these stashes outline the symbol of a bat trailing throughout Gotham. Now, again, there is a lot of symbology throughout this entire chapter here, because after all, Batman is more than just Batman. He is a symbol, and that's what this chapter seems to be just trying to hammer home pretty damn hard. And it's not only in its visual storytelling, but it's also within the actual story itself. But anyways, Alfred has been watching bats enough to find out where he works, find out his routine, and a routine that so just takes Bruce once a week to Blackgate Prison to meet with Joe Chill, the very man who was the killer of his father in the zoo attack. But it's also worth mentioning here that there is a little nod to the Red Hood. However, within this universe, the Red Hood is apparently a suspected resistance group rather than just a singular individual who is, who we're all familiar with. However, given what Batman is capable of doing, he could be considered almost a group in a way, so maybe it's a similar situation here. Maybe everyone thinks that Red Hood is actually a group, but rather than not, it's actually just one dude who is just everywhere all at once at the same time. But this chapter continues further with Alfred mentioning how he is considering telling his handler that Batman is actually helping the case, and that may in turn help him figure out who Sionis is. Not long after this, Batman is cornered in one of his high-rise hideouts, where we get even more symbology that takes place, with Batman escaping and blowing up the building here, but this time it's in the shape of his cowl. And again, he makes it very, very clear, I am here to stay. And it all builds up to this one line where Alfred references how Batman advances forward. It's a military term that he's been talking about previously. And then he says, Batman AF, which is funny to me because originally when I read it, I just read it as Batman as fuck, which I thought was quite funny. It's like the artification of Batman right there. It's quite funny. But obviously that's not what was meant, but I understand if you took it that way. But again, as I mentioned here, there is some really beautiful color work going on in the Absolute Batman and even Superman and Wonder Woman. Again, if you want to check out those videos, you're more than welcome to on the channel here. But the symbology is completely and utterly just rampant throughout this chapter. Even the framing of this panel with Batman staring at his own handiwork, him basically looking up at himself, who is looking down upon the city and anyone who might even try and wrong it. It's just simply beautiful. The whole thing is just mwah. But we also catch up with Jim Gordon, who, lest we forget, in this world of Absolute Batman, isn't actually the commissioner and is in fact the mayor, or at least trying to be re-elected as the mayor, because remember in chapter 1, he wasn't really having a good old time with that one. People weren't too happy with him. But it's also revealed that Martha Wayne and Jim actually know each other, with Jim even asking, what is this world coming to? What is it we've been given? When we were their age, we were crazy, sure, thinking how we could change it all, but it still felt possible then, you know? With Martha replying, I guess they'll just have to be even crazier than we were. With Jim replying, you almost sound like Thomas. And Martha mentions how she misses him, and even mentions how she thinks he'd have actually liked Batman. Which to me, it kind of felt like a little bit of a nod to the Thomas Wayne Batman and like Flashpoint universe and just other Thomas Wayne variations of Batman. Kind of felt like it was a little bit of a nod there. But Jim mentions how he still thinks about it every day. How when he found Bruce and how he didn't even know where he was until he screamed, which is where we were shown a panel of Bruce who's absolutely just covered in bats and terrified right here, just shit scared. But Jim starts to ask how he is and Martha replies, oh, she doesn't even know. I barely know him at all since that day, referring to his father's passing. And we're shown a little bit of a flashback of Bruce and his friends waiting for him, where Bruce had won the first place at the science fair here. Again, harping on just how intelligent this kid was from a very, very young age, which was established in the first chapter there. Now, he tells his mother to leave him alone before throwing out the medal that he'd won, and this becomes a little important detail a little bit later on, so stay with me on that one. But we cut to the present with a poker game where Bruce finally joins his friends who were angry in the previous chapter, who, you know, because he kept skipping out on them. But don't forget, his friends are also just the rogues gallery of a traditional Batman, Killer Croc, Harvey Dent, the Riddler, the Penguin. And speaking of which, I've still also not seen the Penguin, and I hear it just wrapped up, and I hear it had a really fucking good episode on IMDb. So I need to get to watching that, and if you want to see a video on that maybe soon, when I've watched it, let me know in the comments down below. That'd be pretty cool. But also, it turns out the Batman collected a skull from one of the party animals here that acts as a geographical information system, and it maps pretty much all of the targets of the party animals onto a map, which explains just how Batman has been getting around and appearing like clockwork in front of them to meet them head on, as Alfred mentioned earlier. But we see now how Batman is using his friends and their usual traits within like the traditional Batman setting to his advantage. He gives the skull to Eddie, who loves a puzzle to sort out, and he starts that. And the conversation centers heavily on the party animals here, and it's just as I mentioned before, Bruce presses each one of his friends for any sort of possible hints and pieces of information that he can use. Not so much a double agent type thing, but just more of a mutual respect type thing. He pushes Eddie for the puzzle solving on the skull, Harvey Dent for the political aspects on the fight, and finally Ozzy for the potential crime aspect of it all here. And as all of this is happening, each friend sort of folds and bows out of the poker game until we get to Bruce winning over Harvey with 3 aces, 4 if we're playing with jokers, which very, very interesting. But Harvey mentions how jokers were never welcome here. Now, I have mentioned this in my previous video, but I can foresee a scenario where Bruce's fight against crime sort of leads him into his friends' doorsteps here, turning them against him and possibly even driving them towards the Joker of this world here to try and maybe get revenge because they feel betrayed. And a Joker in this universe, for all intents and purposes, he may as well be the traditional Bruce Wayne in his position with all of the money and all of the power, given his intro in the previous chapter here. Anyways, it turns out that the opposition for Gordon is also doing some real shady shit right here, and Batman goes to check it out, finding files on something called Arkham. You get it? Arkham. Not like Arkham, but like Arkham. Yeah, okay, fair. Understandable. If you unsubscribe, that's fair. I get it. But anyway, Batman is confronted here on the big screen by the party animal's leader, and I mentioned before how the storytelling, in both verbally and artistically, is just drenched in symbology and just little beautiful hints and ticks and nods, and it's just, it's beautiful because we get to see Batman's reflection slowly forming and growing in the mask of the party animal here, which just felt like it was kind of like symbolic of like, you're next kind of thing. The Batman's marked you. You have been marked by the Batman, and his presence grows on you. He's getting closer to you, with the leader telling him he'll give him everything he's ever wanted, but he's in a bit of a spot because he's alerted the entirety of the GCPD, and he's also got his own people having the building surrounded, telling him all he has to do is survive. With Batman promptly leaving the building via what seems to be an elevator shaft. We'll get back to that in a minute. But he's greeted here by Alfred, who offers him a truce. He offers him an information exchange almost here. And Bats gives him 30 seconds to talk, with Alfred, being the curious dude that he is, he says, maybe we should scatter from here. Have you got a car here somewhere? Bats just simply replies, you're standing in it. And yeah, you remember that elevator shaft that Bats dropped down? Yeah, it turns out that dropped him right into his Batmobile, which is an absolutely Goliath car, dump truck slash monster truck slash just a huge Goliath vehicle, which again has lots of symbolism on it. That the bat on the front of it is the last thing that you see before Batman just runs your sorry ass over. And again, we also have a bat symbol on the top for anyone who's spectating Batman running your sorry ass over. But you can see the edges of the bat symbol carved out here, and it's just a really fucking nice touch. But this chapter doesn't end here, because remember that medal that Bruce threw out in that little flashback here? Well, it turns out none other than Selina Kyle caught it, and we are being brought back to that moment of her being introduced, asking Bruce, you lost this here? Which is where the chapter officially comes to a close, and honestly, I'm genuinely really excited by this run. My only complaint so far is how short it is. We're part 2 out of 5 right now, and it just feels like I want more. I would genuinely love to see more of this universe, and I think it would be incredibly exciting if DC decided to continue the run, maybe a monthly run or a weekly run, however, get more people on. But I've been really enjoying this run so far, and I'm very, very excited to see what Scott Synder does with the rest of it. But yeah, that is everything from me. If you've not already, please be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, I will catch you guys all in the next one. Also, by the way, if you're into manga, go check out my main channel. I talk about manga over there. But yeah, I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace.